This is the My Campaign Coach podcast, where we talk about how to win elections. Every week, we let you hear straight from the best consultants, operatives, and candidates in the game, all for one reason, to help you win. For more information about how we can help you win, visit mycampaigncoach.com. Now, here's your host, Raj Schaefer.
Welcome to the How to Run for Office podcast from My Campaign Coach. If you're running a campaign, you've got to talk to voters. Campaign Sidekick is a platform that we recommend. They're a sponsor of the show, as well as the platform that my teams have used to knock over 250,000 doors in the last couple of years. So visit campaignsidekick.vote to find out how their best-in-breed voter contact platform can revolutionize your campaign and help you win. This week's guest is a former boss of mine and somebody who helped shape me in significant ways as a candidate and as a campaign trainer. Matt Robbins is a Republican political consultant with clients from coast to coast and abroad. He's helped train over 50,000 activists and candidates in 46 states and abroad, across the nation and across the globe. Matt is a proud alumni of the International Republican Institute and the American Council of Young Political Leaders, and he's actually on their board. He's also affiliated with the Marion Bergeson Excellence in Public Service Series, the Political Leadership Academy, and the Close Up Foundation. He's an Arkansas native with a degree from Pepperdine University in Malibu, California, a really rough place to go to college. And Matt blames the 80s newspaper comic strip Bloom County for an early perverse interest in politics and its absurdities. Matt, it's an honor to have you on the podcast and great to talk to you again.
Thanks, Raz. It's been way too long.
It has. It's definitely been too long. You're somebody that has had a huge impact on me when it comes to both the way I view campaign training and how to train candidates and what they need to know, as well as just have taught me so much of the years that goes today into what I'm doing at My Campaign Coach. And I'm really grateful for the work you've done and how you've helped pass so much of that on to me and so many others.
Thank you for having me. It beats working, huh?
Helping people run for office, it's, as much as we love it, it doesn't feel like work a lot of times. Other times it feels like way too much work.
Right.
It's that's the nature of the beast. But let's start out by talking about your background, how you got involved, and really kind of how you got your start in politics.
Sure. No, it's probably a common tale in politics. I never intended to do this for a living. I never intended to be a junkie. The first one's always free, right? So you get a little taste for it, and then you're back at the street corner asking the dealer for a second hit before you know it. But in another lifetime, Raz, this is 20 years ago now. I was a school teacher, as I think you know. And my Mr. Robbins' 7th grade homeroom class for 3 years running, they cracked the code very early. They knew if they asked Mr. Robbins, who was supposed to teach English grammar and English literature, if they asked him a political question, he would start going off on a rant. He would fill every whiteboard, every space available in the room, and then 50 minutes later the bell would ring. No homework, no assignment. Mr. Robbins is still furiously scribbling on the whiteboards. And class was over. It took me 3 years to figure out what these kids were doing to me. And so I figured one day, as I looked across the room, the ravings of a madman, I realized I should probably be doing something like that. That was my true passion. Fast forward to 2001, I moved to D.C. and got a job in the Pentagon. Was very blessed with that position. It was not a purely political position, but it was political insofar as every bureaucracy in D.C. is a front row seat and a cheap seat at that, to budget battles and internal power dynamics. I worked on a very cool issue of anti-friendly fire, or friendly fire prevention, rather, anti-fratricide programs. We tried to make sure the 4 military services bought and fielded the same weapons and comm systems. Again, very great job. Did that for a couple of years and learned a lot. I just didn't want to be, even though I'm from a military family, I didn't want to be in the Department of Defense for the rest of my career. So stupidly, brashly, eagerly, whatever word you want to insert there, I found a dark horse candidate in the state of Virginia, and they needed a campaign manager. They were a young candidate. Nobody expected us to win. We didn't know enough to realize we wouldn't win. I eagerly took the job on, and literally for nights and weekends for almost 12 months, was down in the district every night, walking doors, hours at a time, every Saturday, all day, 12 hours, every Sunday after church, before the football game, walking doors, and we won the primary, knocked off a 20-year incumbent, and then went ahead and in a swing district. We were down by almost 10 points, 7 percentage points in most polls. We won the general, and that was the start. Winning is better than losing, as we all know. And congratulations to you, by the way, on your recent city council win.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, it's a great feeling, and it gets you hooked early.
Oh,
it
yeah.
really does. So went from there and got on the Bush-Cheney, the presidential reelection campaign, and ran all of Northern Virginia, which really is Virginia. Even back then it was, 2004. Virginia was not a target state yet, but the affluent, densely populated, almost 2 million voters in 3 cities and 2 gigantic exurban counties around Washington, D.C. are the real heart. There is a huge geographical remainder of Virginia. They call that ROVA, the rest of Virginia, but they call NOVA, Northern Virginia, the real pulse of the political state. And so that was the last time we held the state. I have to plug myself there. It was 2004. Bob McDonnell, our beleaguered former Republican governor of Virginia, Bob McDonnell reconstituted some of those coalitions and put together a red map again in Northern Virginia. He was a native of Northern Virginia himself in 2009, but we all know what happened to him. And then ever since, Virginia, since I walked off the job, Virginia's been a purpling and blue state, much to my regret.
I don't know if to call it your fault or what.
I had my finger in the dam. I shouldn't have pulled it out.
Oh. Well, you've been doing some important stuff since then.
been very grateful for the opportunities. Springboarded from pure campaigns. I've often said, 2 things in my life between the school teaching and the campaigns. There's not a whole lot of difference between the 2. Actually, they're very juvenile. You're just under attack all day, every day by parents, principals, students, sophomore behavior, you name it. I mean, if you can handle
Altogether
one,
too true.
You can handle the other. And in all seriousness, the campaign footing, the sense of urgency, the deliverables, the ROI aspect, the metrics, all those things prepare you so well for everything else. And so after doing that, I've done a lot of things. My tortured career involves time at Morton Blackwell's Leadership Institute. I ran all 39 training programs there for a couple of years. We did record numbers, almost 10,000 people just there in my tenure in 1 year. Went on and did some personal consulting. Came back, got the band back together for McCain-Palin 2008 with the headquarters again right in Virginia, right outside Washington. We all know how that one went. It was very painful to be on the receiving end of a textbook perfect organizing and mobilizing campaign as the Obama campaign put together. I have to hand it to him in 2008. He did a perfect run, and in 2012 he actually improved upon it. And then, as you know, I ran a nonprofit for 7 years and became the president after being the national executive director, and trained another 40-something thousand folks across the country. So, my dad was a salesman after being a Marine. I've got a gift of being able to speak to people, I think, and an ability to break down. I think this is not rocket science. This is not brain surgery, but I think some people believe there's a mystique and believe there's some sort of curtain to be pulled back, and there's not. I mean, this is literally push the button, get the banana, right? I mean, this is that basic of a philosophy. If you do the right things, if you take a calendar out, circle the election day in red, work backwards at least 12 months, preferably more, maybe 18 months in an ideal race, and raise money and talk to voters along the way. If you've targeted correctly, if you've chosen the right district before that, of course, to run in, you will have a great shot at winning. And if you don't win the first time, you can almost always win the second or certainly third time. It's not a game for the faint of heart. It's not a game for those who can't persevere. It's not a game for someone who is running for office because they were not voted most likely to succeed in their high school yearbook. I've dealt with that. I'm sure you have. Any number of candidates, I'll make air quotes there with my fingers, any number of candidates who are trying to exact their revenge upon their classmates and upon the world by inflicting their egos upon the rest of us through a political campaign of sorts. Not the right reasons to run. I get up in the morning. I'm very inspired every day, no matter who I work for, whether it's an individual candidate, whether it's an issue campaign, whether it's even a corporation, or even sometimes an embassy or a foreign power, depending on the issue, depending on what they are trying to achieve, the odds against it, and whether or not it's something that needs to be done, whether or not that the political landscape should be changed. There are so many reprehensible things that are going on in public policy right now and in politics. I'm sort of rambling on here, but I often said in my trainings, and I still do, I'm going to Hungary in about 10 days, and I'm going to speak to the Prime Minister, among others in the audience, a World Conference of Catholics, among others. And it's a game and a war at the same time. It really is. And there are issues in politics that are life and death, whether it's abortion or national security. And at the same time, it's the greatest of all grandest chess games and chess matches. And if you can't understand how to hold those two ideas in your head at the same time and play the long game and yet understand that you are changing lives and then even saving lives at times with what you accomplish in the ballot box, then you're missing it.
And I think that's one of those things that you really helped imprint on me and work with you and Drew and others, over the time that we were together and I was learning from you guys. It really helped shape a lot of how I viewed campaign training. Because I was coming as somebody that I had worked on campaigns, I'd learned a lot about politics, but I was still learning as much as I was teaching. And I still try to do that now, but that was definitely 100% true as I was starting to work with you guys. And you guys, even from helping train me as a coach and a trainer, were big about saying, look, don't get wrapped around the axle on thinking you got to have this grand strategy and some of these things. The biggest issue, just like when Napoleon's go after or Hitler's going after Moscow, what defeats you so often is the simple logistics. It's the things you didn't plan for. The system.
Yeah, the wagon wheels get stuck in the mud.
Absolutely, it's socks and wagon wheels. Feed them, keep them in socks, and keep moving. And that's what so many of these campaigns fail on. And it's rooted in a fire ready aim approach. They decide, I'm running for office,
right.
And they announce. So they start telling people, and when they haven't thought through some basic things, they haven't figured out when they're running for office, haven't figured out what the calendar looks like, when you got to file, because you got to file. What
right.
you got to do as far as some of the ethics filings and those things, and filing for a treasurer. And these are basic things, but they're folks at every cycle. We could probably point to somebody that we heard about or know that didn't do one of those things and it bit them in the butt, or they didn't even show up on the ballot because they forgot to do it.
I've known candidates who filed on the wrong day, a day too late. You get a free press story out of that, of course.
not the kind you want.
I've seen candidates who made the check out for the wrong amount for the filing fee. I mean, another free round of press for that, but unfortunately, you don't get to run for office. It's you need to be methodical. You need to be intentional, as the Oprah buzzword is these days.
Well, and part of what we try to do at My Campaign Coach is really help prepare you, pull back some of that curtain, because, like I said, it's not rocket science, it's not brain surgery. It's one of those things that you can learn so much, and with a small amount of time focused on preparation, you can get so ready, and that way, when you can actually implement a strategy, you can figure out why you're running, be able to express that, figure out the logistics training, the systems you got to have in place, and build the strategy that connects with the voters. Then you got to do the hard work, and then you go win. It's like I said, it's a relatively simple proposition. It's not easy though.
Correct, and I was about to hammer that point. Those are very different concepts, and the sweet spot for me, and I think for you as well, is the local and state elections, because the barriers to entry are so low, the thresholds can be easily overcome. Not easily, but handily overcome. Everybody has a Christmas card list. Everybody has an extended network. Certainly if you're thinking of running for office, you should. And you have basic, friends, family, donors, people who can be dragooned in the volunteer service for you and your campaign. And there's really no excuse. Whether you go to CPAC every year or not, whether you go to the Texas Republican Party convention or not, every 2 years, whenever that hits, you realize the amount of money people spend on a hotel stay for 3 or 4 days at one of these things is the amount of what it would cost to run an effective school board race and actually change curriculum. Right?
Absolutely.
Change curriculum, change hearts and minds, reframe the transgender bathroom debate. Whatever your issue is, you could do it for the same amount of money and just a little bit more lengthy time application.
That's one of those things where a lot of candidates underestimate the amount of work it takes. They think that, I've seen so many folks, especially state legislative candidates, they're like, you know what? Nobody else is doing it. There's a bad incumbent. He's got me ticked off. I got a short list of issues that I go crosswise with this guy. And there's these state organizations that conservatives are ticked off this guy too. I'm going to announce, and they're going to pour so much money in my campaign and put so many Facebook posts up that there's no doubt I'm going to just take this thing and walk. And
no one is coming to save you. No one is coming to save you. There is no
help. Yeah, you may have help. They may donate. But the fact is, the candidate is the one that sets the tempo in every respect. From dialing for dollars, knocking on doors. If the candidate's not the hardest working son of a gun on the race, you're going to lose.
Yeah, I think the races that one of the race I alluded to already, and the other small races, or state and local races, none of them are truly small, that I've been a part of. And if you haven't knocked 10,000 doors, before, a month or two before the primary election even gets on people's radar, you're doing it wrong. I'm not asking you to be a stealth mode candidate, but you ought to be out there in the snow. I know it doesn't snow where you are, Raz, but you ought to be out there in the in the elements in at least the winter months, when people are thinking about holidays, when people are thinking about recovering from holidays. You ought to have people look at you, like to quote Dave Ramsey, like you joined a cult. I mean, people ought to be wondering why you're at their door talking about a race that's 5 months away, 6 months away. And special elections are even worse, because the short fuse on those suckers can be weeks at sometimes. There's no excuse for lack of preparation. Everybody sees the same generally published guidelines for when elections are held. It's the same, date every couple of years, every 4 years, unless it's a special, unless somebody resigns or gets carried out feet first or gets caught, with a live hooker or a dead hooker or a live boy, as they say. And then the opportunities present themselves. And if you're not ready to go, you're not ready.
And that's no different than any other job. If you're not going to work hard, if you're not going to dedicate yourself, know the rules to the game, what you're measured on, and why people will approve or disapprove of what you're doing. I mean, you wouldn't go into a job without knowing the responsibilities, knowing what you got to do, and knowing how to go about getting it. Well, so many people don't apply that. Some people that know better, they don't apply that when they look at running for office. And so
they think it's a mystical, they think it's a magical sort of movie, Hollywood George Clooney experience where the handsome profiled candidate waltzes in and takes it. But your outfit, my campaign coach, and this. I mean, I saw this quantified on paper a few weeks ago or a few months ago, I think, and it talked about all the different things that occur on even your smallest race, and it's basically incubating and creating and seeing all the way through to execution several startups. Whether it's in the area of fundraising or direct mail or voter contact or database technology, you name it, coalitions, whatever the issue is. Public relations, communications. I mean, there's 7 to 10 to 15 to 20 cones or spheres, whatever you want to call them, and everybody thinks it's some sort of throw the dart, at the wall and see where it lands.
Any one of those, if you don't do it well, if you don't have a decent plan for it, and you haven't thought that through, you're going to fail. You can't succeed without having all those things work together. And you may not be the best in the world at any one of them, but you got to have something in place. If you don't, you're going to fall on your ass. And so many people, they think that they can just jump out there and that their charisma is going to carry the day, that they're going to have all these coalitions surround them. But the key in a lot of cases I've seen is those startups, one thing that all successful startups have in common is they have a business plan. They've thought through they've looked at their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. They've done that basic SWOT analysis.
Yeah.
They have a clear idea of the product that they're delivering. And they know that meets a clear need and demand that's of the voters at large, or in their case, the customers. They put that together, and that's what they take. I mean, you have to go through. We talked a lot, back in the day when we were training together about how you understand the 3 whys. Why me? Why now? Why this office? And that's something we hammer today when we're looking at all these candidates that we're training. And the people that are able to answer those questions well and succinctly, they're able to communicate.
Sure. And if you're not sick of yourself, if you're not sick of hearing yourself recite the same basic, I'm not saying verbatim, but the same basic, not even stump speech, but the same 30-second elevator, whatever you want to call it, you should have an ethos. You should have a mission. You should have a very succinct, encapsulated 30-second, because no one cares about anything more than that in today's ADD world. If you're not sick of it, if your spouse isn't sick of it, if your friends and family aren't sick of it, by the 1/4 of the way through the campaign point, you're doing it wrong. I mean, you're going to have to it's going to. I forget who said it. It may have been Howard Dean who said that campaigns are MRIs for the soul. I mean, they reveal all. They reveal all. You cannot hide who you are. Lincoln says you can fool some of the people some of the time. There's no way. There will come a night, there will come a day, there will come a surly voter or a friendly voter. There will come a rainy afternoon or a snowy morning or whatever it is where you are alone, you are tired, you are angry, you're lonely, you are hungry, whatever it is, and there's nothing left in the tank, and it's just you stripped down, facing whomever and whatever you're trying to get out of them, whether it's support in the form of resources like money or support in the form of an endorsement or a block of votes, and that's when it really shines through, and that's what we call gaffes in D.C., where I live. That's what we call when someone accidentally speaks the truth. But there really is, there's no way to hide who you are forever on a campaign. You can mask it for a hell of a long time, but not permanently.
That's one of those things that is my favorite part of the campaign. And it can either, depending on who you're working with or for, it can either be a really great thing or it can be a really scary thing. Because you get to see that. You see them at their best and their worst.
And you want a divorce very quickly as a campaign manager, very early on in most cases.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're going to see all the stresses that happen behind the scenes. You're going to see the roller coaster of emotions they go through. And a large part of your job, if you're a campaign manager or consultant, is helping try to help pull them out pull them out of the valleys and make sure they don't get too crazy on the peaks. It's trying to moderate that in a roller coaster. It's a hard part of the campaign manager's
like
job.
A manic depressive.
Oh my gosh! It becomes every candidate is bipolar at some point during the race, and it gets the swings get pretty frequent the closer you get to election day.
Well, and you know why? I mean, you lose. When you become the candidate, you lose 30 IQ points instantaneously.
Oh, and you're constantly under attack. And your family's under attack. You're under attack.
Right.
You're having to. You're having to
figure out
logistics,
dirty business.
everything. Oh yeah, I mean it's a incredibly necessary thing, and I take my hats off to candidates that are willing to put their name on there and that work hard. And that's part of why we try to help these guys. We try to find good people who want to do important things that we believe in and that we believe in the character of, and we try to help them because, my gosh, I mean, it's not something that I would.
They can't do it on their own, Raz, and they need a group like yours because, and I made that joke about their IQ dropping because they have, when you're an armchair general, when you're an armchair observer of politics, small, medium, large, it's easy for you to every cabbie on the planet knows exactly how to solve all the political problems, right? They listen to talk radio all day long in their taxis, and they know exactly what to do because they're armchair warriors. When your name is in the mix, yeah, exactly. Today's modern equivalent of taxi cab drivers, they should all be eradicated. But when you become the candidate, when it's your name on that dotted line, instantly your objectivity is gone. Instantly, every single sling and arrow, every single insult, whether it's individual or collective for your entire family or an entire group of your citizenry, becomes personal, and you become thin-skinned in many cases. You take every attack to heart, and you act like it's not. You forget that you didn't care in earlier political battles what was said about either side, and you just enjoyed the sparring, you just enjoyed the blood sport. But when it's you on the hook, it's pretty painful to watch yourself wriggle.
Well, and it has huge implications. Sometimes they seem bigger than they are, but it has huge implications on how you view yourself, how other people view you, and really what goes on down the line, right? When you're the candidate, your world ends on election day. One or the other. It can turn out good or it can turn out bad. You kind of feel like you're going to heaven or hell depending on the turnout. Thankfully, life does go on, and unless you make an absolute fool of yourself and do stupid things, your life will continue. Your friends won't abandon you. You'll be fine. Hopefully, you've got your spouse on board at the beginning, and she does. You keep her on board throughout.
It's vital. It's vital. You've got to have that buy-in. That's the most crucial vote of them all.
But there's so much that goes into it, and it like I said, your objectivity really goes out the window. And that's
I try
where
to remind. I'm sorry.
That's where so much of having a strong kitchen cabinet, the people that are close to you, that help give you that perspective. Say, hey, look, win or lose, we still love you. We're still your friends. Here's what you're doing. Here's how far your head up is up your butt. Pull it out.
Right.
Here's what you got to do. And they don't let you do stupid things. That's really the most important function of having those key people around you. And you got to get them on in the beginning because they're going to be there with you throughout this whole ordeal. They're going to stand firm with you. They're going to be some of your best helpers. And they're going to make sure, like I said, that you don't do stupid things.
Yeah, I mean, and God love them. I mean, two historical quotes here. I mean, the Roman generals, the conquering Roman generals would come into town with the giant parades. And you know what I'm about to say. They had the slave who walked behind them. And what did the slave say?
Memento mori.
Victory is fleeting, right? Victory is fleeting. He would whisper that in the Caesar's ear every single victory to remind him it's ain't going to last, buddy. And then I tell, I've spoken, just like you, Raz, I've spoken in front of crowds of an intimate, 10 people and then crowds of hundreds and over 1,000 at a time. And you see people who are so passionate, who really, truly, politics has become their end-all, be-all. It's become their hobby. It's become their personal vocation. And yet they're not actively involved. They don't have skin in the game. And they're trying to find a way to get involved or get into the game. And you have to explain to them there's more to life than this. Yes, politics is imperative. It matters who's in office. Elections have consequences, as the previous president, so famously uttered. At the same time, my favorite American author, Mark Twain, says, no matter how good you are, no matter how bad you are, the number of people who are going to show up to your funeral will largely depend on the weather that day, right?
Yes.
I mean, and that's your whole life. I mean, that's the one moment when everybody can show up and pay tribute to you. So if that's your entire life condensed into a ceremony, most people don't care. They get on with their lives. They pay their taxes. They just figure politicians are going to do what politicians do, and they move on.
So before we get into some of the details of even some more of the campaign-focused stuff, talk to me a little bit more about what you're doing now and how you're working helping, like I said, everything from embassies to foreign countries and through the Republican international groups. And tell me more about what you're doing now.
Absolutely. No, it's I never intended to build a book of business. I'm sort of, I'm an entrepreneurial guy, like we discussed earlier, the startups that are involved in a campaign. but I'm not particularly motivated by money. And that's been sort of a strange phenomenon over the past year or so now. There's a lot of people who need a lot of help. There's a lot of corporations. There's a lot of multinationals. There are a lot of associations, trade groups, industry groups who have no idea how to do any of these things that you and I understand as the building blocks of advocacy, as the building blocks of lobbying. I don't mean the slimy registered lobbyist in Washington, D.C. that's paid an exorbitant salary every year. I'm talking about influence. I'm talking about indirect and direct influence. There are, Armenia. I'm working with the country of Armenia, the first Christian nation on earth, as they call themselves. Mount Ararat is in that nation where Noah's Ark came to rest. An Orthodox Christian nation, but the first Christian nation in a bad neighborhood, shall we say? Iran to the north, Turkey to the west, and the Armenians. They just released a movie. Christian Bale actually cherry-picked this project, The Promise. They released a movie on the anniversary, 105th or 106th anniversary of the genocide of about 1.5 or 2 million Armenians, so long ago, and they botched it. Bless their hearts. They botched it. This nation does not understand how the American system of influence, the American system of advocacy works. The evangelicals, we've all figured it out. We've all, from the Passion of the Christ all the way to Dinesh D'Souza's latest blockbuster movie and everything, heaven is real. There is a God, everything in between. We understand how to mobilize and organize and turn out our viewing blocks, our pay, our vote with our feet, vote with our ticket stubs blocks. And that's one example of a country that does not understand that. They've got a new president, a new ambassador, and they're looking to have more direct engagement with this administration in Washington and have a better public image, for lack of a better word. They want the world to stand up and recognize what this poor small nation has been through. And there's so much affinity. There's so much affinity, much like with Israel or any other persecuted country in that part of the world. There's so much natural affinity that's just being left on the table. So that's one example. I told you earlier, I'm gravitating very naturally. My father was a Marine. My brother's an active duty Air Force pilot, multiple forays in Afghanistan and Iraq both. So veterans are another thing that I'm working with exclusively. Maverick PAC is the George P. Bush, founded and McCain sort of endorsed organization for young professionals. Maverick PAC is spun off a veterans group, and they're recruiting exclusively Republican Iraq and Afghanistan veterans of the last 15 years to run for office. Veteranscampaign.org is a group I work with and advise and train for. They've now affiliated themselves with University of San Francisco, and they are doing an online course as well as in-person trainings. They do hundreds of bipartisan trainings. These are veterans, though, and in my book, the bipartisan, the paradigm sort of cracks when you get to the veteran groups, because these people have spent an entire career, in most cases, defending this country voluntarily and making it their way through the officer corps, even the enlisted ranks. And then they're ready for a career of second service. So it really speaks to me to see someone who at 45, 48, 52, even 60 in some cases, having been a major, having been a lieutenant colonel, having been a E5 in the Air Force or some other service, wants to go back and use their credentials, use their pedigree, use their capabilities and run for elective office. That takes another tremendous sacrifice. They're not doing it for the money. They've got a pension. They've been retired, and rightfully so, in my opinion, after 20, 25 years in harm's way. But it really is inspiring to me to teach them. And these, again, are very, they're specialized in the military. Everybody's specialized in your own little cone and silo. And so to be able to teach them almost from baby steps what a campaign looks like, feels like, smells like, sounds like is very humbling and very exciting.
Well, so much of the time when we're looking for candidates and people that we want to invest in and help and see get elected, the hardest part is the intangibles, right? Because we know that so much of the fundamentals of campaigns, like I said, it's baby steps, things that you can teach somebody. What you can't teach somebody is character and that life experience and really the perspective that they have. And one of the great things about some of these veterans, especially these ones we have that are coming off of these tours overseas, they've seen the implications of spending and taxes and national security and how all this stuff ties together because it affected their day-to-day lives and their ability to keep their people coming home. So they see that, and so they've got so many of those intangibles. It's not a monolithic group, but there's so many incredible people coming out. And especially for, as you mentioned to me when we were talking offline, we have about 1% of the population here in America, or if not less, is serving voluntarily. They're joining the military. But we have so much concentration of that character and experience and knowledge and desire
leadership
to serve.
abilities.
Absolutely.
Leadership abilities. Yeah.
And so they're coming out such strong leaders with experience, managing huge budget, managing lots of problems from the front line to the battle back home.
And people, managing numbers of people, yeah.
I mean, and one of the things about working in the military, you don't just get to fire somebody because because you don't like them or because they did something that ticks you off one day. You're forced to lead people that you didn't choose, that are coming from all walks of life.
And you have no idea how powerful what you just said is. I was sort of inculcated in this as a kid, and I think that's why desegregation. I think that's why racism does not exist in our armed services. It does not, because when you have to go to the front lines with men, women, black, white, Hispanic, straight, gay, whatever it is, it all stops. It all stops right there when the bullets start flying. No one cares anymore. Hell, it starts long before that in boot camp when you've got to help each other over that wall. It really is a fascinating part of our society, and one that we don't give enough props to. It really is.
There's definitely a lot to be done. We definitely need a lot more veterans, from the city council and school boards on up into Congress. I mean, we need more of these people that have that leadership experience and all these other intangibles. And it's a pleasure. I'm excited for you getting to work with these folks to help train and help get them in.
Thank you. I'll send as many as I can. I mean, these are folks who come through a nonprofit 501c3 veterans campaign, again, bipartisan, funded by university and other sources. And we're doing this basically gratis. So I'm happy to refer them to you and other folks like you who I know can give them the really hard skills. I mean, these are people who can literally build a bridge over a river in a foreign country in a matter of
under
hours.
Fire.
Right. But they don't know how to do these fundamental things. And I would challenge anybody listening, take a look at Tom Garrett. Take a look at my dear friend Tom Garrett from Virginia's 5th Congressional District, a freshman congressman in the House Freedom Caucus right now. You will not find a more articulate, you will not find a more enlightened, you will not find a more conservative, liberty-loving individual than Tom Garrett, sitting every night with Anderson Cooper, talking about the healthcare vote, talking about the hate threats he gets. He handles it all with aplomb because he's been under fire in Bosnia. He handles it all because he knows, what the other world is like. He comes back here to fight for these things because he knows what happens when nobody does.
All of a sudden, the problem of caving on principle, and when you're under fire from leadership or from the other side of the aisle, that is a little bit less of a big thing to you when you've actually been under real fire, when real bullets have been coming your way. The metaphorical or ideological bullets mean a whole lot less. And I love that, because so many of these guys, their willingness to stand up for what they believe in has been so ingrained in them that I worry a lot less about them caving because of the character and what they've been through when they get up to D.C. And as you know, we've seen and even helped elect people that we see later on go and cave and go the other way. And that's always a fear when we're helping people and when we're vetting them. But it's awesome.
They go off the reservation, but
absolutely.
Not these folks. Yeah.
And that's one of the wonderful things about them, because they've been through it. And they've been through a lot harder things, been up against a lot bigger challenges. And so they stick to it. They want to serve this country in a real way.
And then just come around the horn. I mean, the last two projects that I did in conjunction with these, the JASTA bill, the 9/11 survivors bill, that was passed over a presidential veto by a Republican Congress. They overrode a veto, one of the few times in American history that they did that. Veterans, these same veterans in many cases that I just spoke of, have no issue at all with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia being sued as state sponsors of terrorism. Everyone knows they're state sponsors of terrorism, just like Iran or anyone else. The problem is the way that, and John McCain and Lindsey Graham, whatever you think of their domestic politics, they understand the warfighter's perspective. And the way the law was passed and written endangers people like my brother, who can be literally sued for dropping a bomb on a mud hut in Afghanistan. Personally sued, personally taken to the dock in The Hague or an international tribunal elsewhere. And then on the fun side, I spent a lot of time the last several months pushing out a couple of books, promoting a couple of friends' bestsellers. I had a friend who was President Ronald Reagan's personal assistant, his last executive assistant for 15 years, post-presidency, post-White House. And then she worked for Nancy, of course, and the family until her death just recently. And Peggy finally published her memoirs, and it was more of a story about her experiences with these true American heroes, these true American icons. Can you imagine getting to sit at Ronald Reagan's side from age 22 until your
incredible.
40s, as you're raising your own 4 children? You're President Ronald as he goes through Alzheimer's, as Nancy declines, as the family and the library and everything else is done. A remarkable book. It's called The President Will See You Now. I managed promotional aspects with Peggy on that publication. My other buddy wrote a book. Tom Baselli, I think. Tom wrote a book about the media war in Iraq, and it's seemingly a dusty topic, no pun intended, a 10-year-old war that's been over, and not over and over again, and yet you read the book and you see the same principles. The media war, the absolute Armageddon, all out, scorched earth Armageddon that we're seeing now on the fake news and the cable networks and the online social media fronts. Tom is he's a maestro. He's an absolute master of calling it like he sees it. He's very, very talented.
That's fantastic.
So those were fun. Those were good times.
I believe it. And we'll definitely link to both of those in the show notes here on the blog. And I had to get copies. I'd seen Tom, but haven't got around to ordering it yet. I got one of the emails about it and I read it. It looks fantastic. So that's
get you signed copies of both of them. We will.
Heck yeah, I like it. So looking back to the political trading side, a lot of these campaigns, we talked about how so much of this comes down to kind of those cones or systems and major things. When you're looking to get a campaign, there's somebody coming in to give advice or helping start one, or just as a casual observer, we see so many of those. What are some of the key things that you look for that help tell you whether a campaign's healthy or not?
Yeah, the first thing I do, and this is, again, drawing from my deep Southern Bible Belt upbringing, is the come to Jesus, of course, with the candidate. And you sit down and you take stock, and you basically tell the candidate, male or female, which can make for a very interesting conversation, done it both ways, to tell you every bad thing they've ever done in their entire life. And this is not Gran Torino with Clint Eastwood, where he confesses to exactly one indiscreet kiss of someone else, in 1968. This is an actual sit down, roll my sleeves up and tell me what is going to be used against you. Because as Republicans, as conservatives, as libertarians, as independents, as declined states, anything but the left, you're going to be challenged on every single platform you propose to even possibly stand on. Family values, sexuality, financial dealings, home ownership, business liens, any and all of that's going to be thrown at you from square one. That's the double standard we face on the center right. That's the double standard we face on the conservative right. It's just the way it is. And if you can't accept that, you have no business running for office. If you can't accept that double standard is going to be applied unfairly to you. So the come to Jesus is the first step. And it's very sad sometimes to sit down and as you're having that, you have the why, the 3 whys questions as part of that introductory speech. I sat down with a wonderfully talented, currently serving, in a reserve capacity, currently serving Army officer, cybersecurity expert, 25 years old, 25-year-old African-American young man, brilliantly accomplished, brilliantly driven, already a dad, already so ahead in life, and yet does not understand the foggiest. Could probably stop the Russia hacking, insert groan right there. Could probably stop it, anytime he wants, and yet doesn't understand the foggiest idea about targeting the right place to run. He doesn't understand that running in a district that votes 70, 80% Democrat every single cycle is not going to yield a victory. He does not understand that. He thinks he can somehow overcome it with his race or with his unique story or with his last name, whatever it is. It ain't so. This is applied mechanics. This is X plus Y gets you Z, and it's not any more complicated than that. It takes time, it takes effort. But those first conversations with a candidate, every self-help book, every Dale Carnegie primer, every Zig Ziglar, anything you've read, you know what someone's about when you meet them for the first time, and you can size up whether you're a Malcolm Gladwell reader or not. You can size up in the first blink, what somebody's all about, and somebody's got what it takes. To get through a race, and I think I've honed that instinct pretty well. I spend most of my time, as I unfortunately has become a tagline of mine, I spend most of my time discouraging people from running for office.
That's always the first thing I try to do when I sit down with the candidates. I try to talk them out of it.
Why would you do this? Why would you do this to yourself? Why would you do this to me? I don't care how much you want to pay me. Why would you make me go through this again? Why? Why would you make all of us suffer with you? And I say that somewhat tongue in cheek. We all do it for the right reasons. We all do it to get somebody over, on the right side of the column again. And the Gorsuch, nomination and victory was a beautiful instance at the highest levels of the land of what happens when people, real, almost immaculate people, get in the right place of power and probably will be there the rest of his natural life, which is wonderful. And yet you have to deal with what you got. You got to go to war with the army you have, as they say. And it's very hard for a lot of people to understand that their dreams and their fantasies about being loved and beloved and forever held aloft on the arms and shoulders of an adoring populace just ain't going to happen. It's not in the cards for them.
And it's really important that they get from the point of not believing that to really embracing that. That's a critical part of being a candidate, because if your goal is to be loved by everybody, one, I just tell you right now, you're not going to be successful. And two, in the pursuit of that, you're going to castrate yourself and you're going to just debase yourself in every possible way. All the different principles that you said that you wanted to run for, they're in those 3 whys. You're going to divorce yourself from them all. Because if your highest goal is to be loved, then you're going to be constantly moving yourself from one side to the other, changing your opinions, not because your opinion actually changed, but because you want to make people happy. That's, I want to see fealty to principle. I want to see somebody that actually stands for something, that they're willing to not be loved by everyone in order to promote those things that matter.
I love all that too. I do, Raz, and I love the mechanics of a campaign, but I also love people who are happy warriors. And I've already invoked Reagan once in this conversation, so I won't do it again. But our current vice president, he said it best. I heard him years ago. He said, "I'm a Republican, but I'm not in a bad mood about it." And if you, and we laugh every time, because if you can't go out there joyously and join the fray, if you can't see the absurdities of all this modern life and this modern culture and this modern political system, Churchill said it best. Democracy is the worst kind of government, except for all the others. There's this. Do you want to be in Venezuela, where they're literally, eating tree bark right now, like they're North Koreans? Do you want to be in North Korea? Do you want to be in China? Do you want to be in Saudi Arabia? Do you want to be in Iran? This is the best system devised by human instruments ever in the history of this planet. And if you want to access it, it is freely available. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of elected offices up for election every 2 years, as we've researched assiduously and published. There are I think, 3,141 counties in this nation, this great nation. There is everything from dog catcher to board of supervisors chairman in every one of those counties, or county commission where you are, a railroad commissioner, whatever it is. There's no excuse for wanting to serve, and I mean truly serve your fellow man. If you're looking for the 37.5-hour work week and the great, pension and the great retirement, you're missing the calling. Go be a government bureaucrat at the DMV. If you want to actually move the needle, run for office.
And there's such a demand, because when we see some of these seats that, out of those hundreds of thousands of seats, we see somebody that, one, are never contested. The only times that more than one person runs for that seat is when somebody dies or decides they want to retire. There's so many of those out there that they never have to face a contest. There's so many of those that that are contested, that don't have somebody run for them that has a smidgen of principle, the happy warrior attitude, or the willingness to put a campaign together, actually put work into it. So it's not one of those things where you have a crowded field across the board of good people, tough campaigns running. Some of these are ripe for the taking.
They're asleep at the switch. They've been asleep for decades in many cases. I mean, you're right next door to my home state, Arkansas. The first Republican state house, the first Republican congressman from my home district since Reconstruction. And this happened in multiple states in the last several cycles. And I hate to point this out, but even in a year like 2010, we were there for that wave election. We had all the buckets put out in the right place before that Tea Party wave hit. Even in that year, 78% of all Democrats won re-election to Congress. That's not what I would call an incumbent endangered, an endangered incumbent program. I mean, in an average cycle, 98.5% of Congress people are reelected. Your average, milquetoast congressional election. That's not acceptable. That's not acceptable at that level. It's not acceptable at the local school board level. It's not acceptable at the county level, the city level. I mean, who's making these decisions for you? Who is deciding where your tax dollars, which parks are built, which schools are built, which contractors are building the roads? I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Well, and as you mentioned earlier, so many of these races, especially on the city council and school board level, and some of these medium to small size districts, we're talking about $200 and some shoe leather is what it takes to run and win, to have impacts on millions, if not tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in budget every year. That you're one.
Start with your HOA. Start with your homeowner association. I mean, you want to talk about modern tyranny, Raz. I mean,
good Lord. It's awful here in Texas.
Theism.
It's terrible.
Yeah, how dare you put an American flag on your porch? How dare you? I mean, we laugh, but it really has become rebellion. It really has.
Well, there's definitely a lot of those opportunities out there. There's no excuse, you said, for someone wanting to serve. And, I mean, you have the opportunity. It's there. If you're willing to get out and do a little bit of work, you can do it. To your point about having that initial come to Jesus meeting, these folks, that's something a few weeks ago we had a couple of guys that specialize in opera research on here and talk about that vulnerability study. It's important to have an incredible level of transparency with those folks you're bringing in, because there are things that you may think are not a problem. I mean, you're not going to think you're a bad person. I mean, few of us do, and none of us that run for office think we're a bad person. And so there are a lot of things that you have to be open about and have to bring up. You have to bring up a lot of stuff, and then it's their job. It's your job to figure out what matters. The candidate themselves is not in the role of figuring out what matters or what's disqualifying or what people may not like. That's not their job. Your job is to open up everything.
Well, I found it so refreshing. I just talked about this with a political peer, I think on the radio the other day, and we were talking. I remember vividly when George W. Bush in 2000, And this is really not, you don't hear this very often in politics. I know you were a wee lad at the time, but George W. is standing there on the stage with Al Gore, the presumptive president, of course. And at some point, W does the dismissive, Texas, shoulder thing and says, look, if you don't like my policies, vote for the other guy. And you can almost hear the smelling salts, and the vapors, in the room. So few politicians are willing to even conjure up the possibility that somebody might not like them, might not want them, or might not hold it against them personally, and yet wants to be a lifelong whatever. Get over yourself. Get yourself out of the equation, as the Buddhists say, and just try to focus on the mission. Try to focus on serving your fellow man.
So when you're looking at those campaigns, after you've had that Come to Jesus talk, what are the primary of those cones or systems that you look at that are really critical that you got to plan for in the early stages of that campaign?
Who do you know? That's my first question. Who do you know?
And that Christmas card list.
It does. It ties. My good friend talks about that every year when he does a fundraising lecture, and he talks about how he sits down. He's been a candidate, and he's been on both sides of the aisle, or both sides of the equation rather. And he sits there and he puts a cigar and a beer on the desk, and he only allows himself to light the cigar after 100 phone calls have been made. 100 phone calls to that Christmas card list. This includes your aunt, your uncle, your nephews, everybody else that's of legal giving age. And then he only opens the beer when he's done 1,000 calls. And you talk about a lot of voicemails, a lot of hang-ups, a lot of misconnections, whatever it is. You go through it. It's painful. We always feel like it's asking for or begging for money. It's not. It's asking for an investment in your vision for the office. So that's got to be it. And more to the point, you got to have the money is the coal that goes in the engine and keeps the ship running, the campaign running. Money's not everything. You can make up for a ton of it with grassroots support, with shoe leather and elbow grease. You can do it with volunteers, whether it's church, friends, coworkers, homeschoolers, whatever it is, you name it. But you've got to have all those things covered. So you've got to have some sort of built-in authenticity. You've got to have that caliber of character and that known quantity, that brand, if you will, in your local community. You can't just waltz in. I mean, this is why carpetbaggers were hated so virulently for so many years in the Deep South. And it's not an issue anymore about where you lived, even in Ossoff's race down in Georgia. He didn't live in the district. It's not an issue anymore because we're so transient, but people want to know that you are invested, you have a stake you have skin in the game, and you are going to be concerned about the district. Your kids go to school there, you've run a business there, you've been a parent there, whatever it is, you're a worshiper there, you've paid taxes there, whatever the issue is, they want to know you've got some sort of investment, and that matters a lot. So if I can't see somebody lay out a practical case as to why they are a natural. I've got this is probably the wisest woman I know. She said years ago at one of the trainings I appeared jointly with her. She said running for office should always be, and she called it an of course moment. Of course, Raz Schaefer is running for office.
Oh yeah.
Raz has been a pillar in the community. Raz has been active in Rotary. Raz is a Freemason. Whatever go on and fill in the blanks. Raz is runs a payroll, operates a small business, landscape, whatever it is. It should never, running for office should never be a, oh, really? Oh,
yeah, you do not want that reaction.
They're running for office?
Really?
Really? Yeah. Why in the world would they run? Yeah, those are total disconnects. And if you can't seamlessly transition from one identity, it's the same you, but if you can't transition from being that civic leader, which is what Obama did so, masterfully, at least told the narrative of being a community organizer and civic leader, and spawned millions upon millions just like him, then you're not going to make the cut.
Well, Dr. Mark Campbell, who you may know through the internet, some of the international Republican organizations, he was on a few weeks ago, and he shared a story from a diner waitress that he met with, or that came by his table serving coffee at 3 in the morning up on I-80 in Iowa one campaign season. And he was reading a newspaper about some scandal, some political scandal or something like that, and she looked at it and she says, damn it, I just want to vote for somebody who's like me, who shares my values, is smarter than me, but doesn't act like it. And he was like, whoa, I need to write that down. And this is a guy now he's been involved in politics and consulting for 50 years. This guy knows his stuff. And he was like, that was one of the most poignant statements of what voters care about and what they actually want to see in a candidate. And you have that community background, you have that status, people know you and they know who you are. You're the kind of person that they want to see run for office. When you step up, when you show that you're somebody that's like them, you have similar values, that you're somebody that they know is smarter than them, but you don't act like a jackass. If you can show that, that's somebody that folks are going to be excited about getting behind.
Yeah, I mean, George Burns always said if you can fake sincerity, you've got it made, right? I'm kidding. I'm kidding. We want to be real. We want to be authentic. Authenticity, whether it's the Twitter, the viral videos on Twitter, the makeup contouring videos on Twitter. God, my God, they're plaguing my timeline all the time. What list did I get on? I don't even know anymore. Whatever it is, they want to know that you're a real person putting on their pants the same way they do, one leg at a time, every single day. And everything you just described describes the Trump phenomenon. We won't go into that presidential equation because that's a thesis. That's a complete PhD doctoral level thesis. But I will point out, you listed Dr. Campbell, and if you want to get super smart, if anybody listening to this podcast wants to get probably super smart for the next 6 to 10 years in this game, go grab any book by George Hawley, Dr. George Hawley at the University of Alabama, Tuscaloosa. George just wrote 3 books in a row. I think the latest one coming out is is about the alt-right, is about what just happened with Trump. The one before that is about the decline of evangelical Christians and the congregations. And the one before that was voting patterns among the white electorate. I mean, you read 1, 2, or 3 of those books, you will be as well versed as anybody. George is a data cruncher. George is a demographics expert. George will sit there. He will tell you the numbers and tell you how many more cycles you can win this kind of a race in this state for how many more years. And That's it, and that's all. If you want to look at it from a scientific point of view, go read George Hawley's works.
That's fantastic. Those are definitely some books that I'm going to add to my reading list. We'll link to those as well. I always get a longer reading list. Anytime I talk to you, my reading list gets longer on my homework. Still getting it from you, even though I don't work for you
I like to
anymore.
read. I do.
It's so important. I mean, everything from looking at Green and Gerber's work on Get Out the Vote, these Hawley books, I mean, those are so important. And you can learn a whole lot more from some of those books from guys that have been in the trenches and have studied this a little bit than getting caught up in a lot of the blogs and a lot of the current events that are out there. A lot of that, so much of what people write in the blogs about, not
it's
my
gossip.
blog, by the way, but
it's
it's from people that don't know anything about campaigns and they've observed maybe a little bit or one, and now they're in authority. You got to go to the people that have the experience, have the track record, that have trained some people. They've trained winners and losers, that they know the difference. They've got the slings and arrows and the scars to show somebody that's been in there. Once again, Dr. Campbell, he said, the definition of a good consultant is somebody that's made all the mistakes and is still around. He's learned the difference.
Right. No, a lot of us, I would say it's an honored few. It's a precious few people. I mean, this is sort of it's a sleazy business, Raz. You know it. I mean, to have a Christian conservative running a shop like yours, and in my own humble opinion, to offer my services to people for mission-driven results, for things that align with my values, my worldview. I don't think there's enough of that. I mean, I don't.
There's not.
Mercenaries and hired guns are one thing, but I mean, this country is changing. The body politic is changing. For God's sake, what they're talking about running Joaquin Castro for U.S. Senate in your state. I mean, it's like, what do we need to do to wake people up to what is about to unfold, or what could unfold if good people don't get involved? It's a never-ending battle. It doesn't mean it's total war. It doesn't mean it can't be joyous, as I said before. It just means that good people have to step up and keep stepping up. And if you can't find good Sherpas and good, Indian guides, scouts to lead them through a political landscape, then you're screwed.
Well, Edmund Burke's quote that you talk about all that required for evil to occur is for good men to do nothing, right?
Yeah.
It's a bastardization of his paraphrase of his quote. But the point is that we have to have people. If you're someone that believes that something needs to happen, that doesn't see your school board or your county commissioner's court or Congress or state legislature doing what it should, if you believe there's a qualitative difference between the values that you have and the people around you hold and what's happening in those bodies, then you have a duty to get active. And for most people, it may not be running, but there's a lot of people out there that we need stepping up to put their names on the ballot to do that hard work. For the rest,
turn off Fox News and go run.
Oh my gosh! Shut down Facebook. Turn off the TV
and go run.
Get out
Stop
there.
being passive. Stop being passive. Be active. You don't have to be aggressive. Be active.
There's so many people out there that want to vote for, donate to, and support good people. There's such a dearth right now. You look at so many of these candidates, and you look at the whole slate, and you're like, I don't like any of these people. And this guy may agree with me on a lot of stuff. He might even vote the right way, but he's not a great guy. There are plenty of Republicans that I'm like, okay, this guy might have a decent voting record, but I don't want to have a beer with him. Right. I don't think he's a good person. And conversely, there are Democrats out there that I'm like, I will never agree with a single thing that comes out of his mouth, but he's a darn good guy to have a beer with. He's a good person, a good individual.
I mentioned Joaquin Castro for a reason. He's actually a close friend of mine, Raz. I mean, the man and I could not be more polar opposites on politics. We are completely reversed on every issue, from race to minorities to police justice, to law enforcement, you name it. But Joaquin is a very caring father, very caring husband. All those great things. He's a human being, and he shows up. And we so often abdicate on that front. We don't put our people front and center. The left, whether you want to believe in the Alex Jones, George Soros conspiracies, or whether you want to just simply watch it all unfold like a soap opera on talk radio and on TV, it's, if you don't show up, someone's going to fill that void, period.
So as we're kind of wrapping up, what are some of those top mistakes you see candidates make every cycle? I mean, you've seen thousands of campaigns. What are some of those biggest pitfalls they fall into?
Yeah, the first one is that psychological hurdle of asking for money. A candidate has one job, and that's to ask for support, period. To ask for support.
Voters
a candidate's one job. That's right. You want money and you want votes. That's all. If you're not asking for money, you're not asking for votes, and you have no business. You have no reason to be showing up at that League of Women Voters, or that civic forum, or that debate. I'm making air quotes with my fingers for a third time, I think, in this conversation. You have no. If it's not going to garner you a donation or someone's physical vote, there's no reason to show up. It's just verbal fantasy. It's just verbal, filling the air. It's insanity. It's not glamorous. It's not sexy. You should be out. I mean, I'm telling you, those first races I did, it was not fun to be on the sidewalks, as you well know, between hours of 3 and 6 and 7, when dinner is starting to be served at all those tables. Every Saturday when everybody else is enjoying everything else but politics. Every Sunday for between 1 and 5 before the game starts, the Redskins here, and which is a holy ceremony second only to church. And you feel like a misfit toy. You feel like an absolute outcast and reject. But if you're not out there doing that, if you're not willing to lead by example and actually put the time in, again, there's days you're not going to want to do it. There's days you're going to want to pass. There's days your spouse isn't going to want to do it. Your kids aren't going to want to do it. Your relatives aren't going to want to do it. Your volunteers, your campaign manager's not going to want to do it. If you can't find the way to every single day go out and ask somebody new for a vote and go ask somebody new for money, then why the hell are you bothering? If you don't believe enough in yourself to say that, you know what, in the same way C.S. Lewis said, in the same way you should value your own abilities no more but no less than any other human beings that you look at. That's not pride. That's simple, clear-eyed. You look at someone else's credentials and you say, from a clear-eyed point of view, they are qualified to do X, Y, and Z. You look at yourself, and because you know the inner monologue, and you know the inferiority complexes, you say, well, I could never do that, or I have this flaw, or whatever it is. To view yourself soberly, accurately, in a clear fashion, and go out there and offer yourself, and it really is sacrificial. I'm sorry to go so biblical at the tail end of this, but it really is to offer yourself up for all these attacks and all this real crucifixion is a very noble thing, and that's what I'm smiling as I say it. It inspires me to this day. I'm 46 years old. It still gets me up in the morning. I still relish meeting a candidate, seeing a campaign, seeing an issue, seeing a country, seeing a company. There are people who need help. There are people who need leadership. There are people who need solutions. Our country has real problems, and there's no excuse anymore. All the information in human history is at our fingertips. All the technology, all the shortcuts, all the apps, all the crowdfund, everything, is right there. And if you can't do it, then you can't complain about the outcome.
What are some of those other pitfalls that a lot of folks fall into?
Oh gosh, beyond the perseverance, beyond the gut check, and that's unfortunately a double-edged sword, because a lot of times you'll get a candidate who's able, in a really weird way, to endure a lot of pain and suffering. You'll get really people who are not fit to be in office, who really sort of have a martyrdom complex, if you follow me, who really enjoy, I guess, kind of being viewed strangely by their fellow human being, not getting buy-in from your spouse, from your family, not getting buy-in from your peers, not listening, as you said earlier, to those people who are going to tell you the truth. My God, you're going to have so many people telling you how great you are. If you believed 1/10 of it, I mean, you're filling a seat. I mean, you're filling a seat maybe in a lavish. I mean, think of the nicest city council you can in Silicon Valley, California. Think of the San Jose City Council. I've got friends who work on that city council. Think of the trillions of dollars in tax revenue available to them. And what's 20 minutes away? Oakland, California, with the highest murder rates in the nation. And all the problems, all these things that are right there. If you can't see that you are going to be at the same time a leader, and yes, you're going to be a grand leader. Hopefully you will stand for great things. There are moral issues and imperatives to stand for. But if you can't see that you're also going to be moving it along and making sure the school budget gets passed and making sure this gets trimmed and this gets, this textbook gets okayed, it's a very mundane job on many, many levels. You got to keep those things in mind. These folks who see politics as a stepping stone, who see this office as an instant and immediate stepping stone to the next level and the next level. I'm all for the farm team, as you well know. I'm all for people grooming themselves and building that pipeline and making sure you've served in the local community, in the state house perhaps, or in the county capacity, and then going on to the federal government or wherever else statewide. But I'm not for jumping the gun. I would say it takes about, to quote Stephen King, it takes about 10 years to be an overnight success, period. And that's in life in general. So if you can't accept the long game and the patience and the perseverance and the humility it's going to take to endure that, then you're in the wrong line of business.
You're 100% right. And I always like to doubly emphasize having the buy-in of your family and your spouse.
Oh.
You can't do it. You will wreck your marriage. You will wreck your campaign. You will wreck lots of other relationships if you don't have not just, okay, honey, if you want to do it, that's fine. They have to be your biggest fan. They have to be willing to work hard. You're going to be getting out early, going to bed late. You'll be spending a lot of time that would otherwise go to your family. You're taking all that time that you're putting on the campaign from somewhere. And in most cases, that's coming from your family in large part.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes a huge toll on the family. You've got to be willing to show that. You have to show them your love, because that's, especially when you come from our worldview, of saying, look, the family is truly first. Your duties to God and your family, and this rest of the stuff about your county, city, country, that's subservient to those other duties.
It can become a false god very quickly. It can.
Oh, yeah.
And even our beloved Ronald Reagan, I mean, you look at his children. He did not have good relationships with his kids.
I'll tell you, we've interviewed him on this podcast before, a guy represented Matt Krause. He's a guy that came through our training years ago, and he's an awesome guy. And I just love the way that he views his role and what he does, and the way he puts his family first in all. It's so incredible to me. There's not a single, we get together pretty frequently for breakfast every now and then when he's back in district. And every time when we put an order in, he's put an order in for extra bag of pancakes, take them to his kids. He's making sure he's home for birthdays, for anniversaries. Sure. He's planning vacations out months, if not a year ahead, so it's on the counter. It will not be moved. I actually invited him to an event in August. I've invited him 4 or 5 months ago to an event at the end of August. He's like, sorry, Raz, I got a family vacation planned then. It doesn't matter. The governor could call him and say, hey, Matt, what are you doing on August 29th? He'd say, sorry, Governor, I can't meet with you that day. I got a family vacation.
Yeah.
That's the kind. I mean, you have to put your thought and planning in this. We see it. The same problems that you see with workaholics and stuff like that, they're going to come up here.
Absolutely.
You've got to put your family first.
And the other side, unfortunately, there are exceptions like my friends I mentioned earlier, but the other side does seem to have a natural gravitational pull toward bureaucracy, toward enjoying collectivism, toward enjoying government, civil, public service, unionized almost in every instance. They enjoy the growth and aggrandizement of all these things that are not vital to life. I mean, every time there's a shutdown or a threat of a shutdown, they talk about non-essential employees, right? And they're told to stay home. So what in the world are we doing paying these people in the first place to be at their post? It's just, for us, conservatives have always been so willing and happy to raise a family, make a living, worship in the manner of their choosing, and that was it. And unfortunately, we're at a crossroads in American history where that's no longer sufficient. So there are the Cincinnatises among us who have to sacrifice their own, quiet life, who have to basically become a general from that armchair and go forth and do battle so the rest of us can raise our families and have a culture and a country that we're remotely connected to any longer.
Well, that's a project that I love being a part of, and I appreciate the influence you've had on me and helping make me so much better and smarter when it comes to this kind of work. And I'm excited for the work you're doing now, especially with the veterans, being able to get so many more of them involved in running and winning office. That's
you should come speak. You should come speak to us. You should come speak to both groups.
Anytime, anywhere, you tell me and I'll be there. Definitely love to help. Either one of us, especially for the listeners. If there are questions, if there's things that you want to hear us write about, if you want to have Matt come and speak or myself, anything, myself and some, Matt and some of the other guys we have on this podcast. The reason we're in this business is it's not for the money, because Lord knows we can make more going somewhere else. It's because we want to be involved in this. It's a fight we believe in, and we think it matters, and we want to leave that legacy. And Matt, I think especially for you with that legacy of helping so many veterans, with getting them involved and helping get them in offices where they can have that second service is huge. Where can folks find you online if they got questions or want to reach out?
I'm pretty easy to find on Twitter 24/7. You'll pardon my assistant, my loyal assistant, Marshall. He's named after Lord Marshall from the old English Magna Carta days. You can find me at Matthew B. Robbins on Twitter. I'm pretty averse to all other forms of social media, Raz. I don't have
still don't
time.
have Facebook?
I'm not on Facebook. I just can't. I can't do it. And from all accounts, every third-party account I read, I'm glad I'm not. I get all my news. I get all my politics from Twitter. I comment, as I probably should not, more often than I should on Twitter. LinkedIn is my other, sort of permanent home. But I'm easy to find, the right people, I guess.
Perfect. Well, we'll include links and hopefully the right people and probably some of the wrong people will be able to find you. But we'll get you out there and we'll promote those social media links that you've got. Matt, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks
I definitely want to have
Pat.
you sometime in the future as well. I just got so much information we can't pack it all into an hour. But I appreciate your time.
Enjoyed it.
I just appreciate everything you're doing. So you have a wonderful day and look forward to talking again soon.
You bet, buddy.
Please subscribe and rate us on iTunes to help spread the word. We'll be back with you next week with more campaign insights from My Campaign Coach.